wonderful. Professor Fred Ogola is my guest tonight as we discuss his ambition and his plan for the nation. And Prof, we come to you, lots of complaints across Africa, sometimes them saying that the bigger brothers have really not had good intentions in seeing us grow. And, seeing a united Africa, seeing an Africa that can tap into the resources and become better. And that we see our leaders getting excited for that endorsement, be it in academic forums or be it, in political spaces, that when you're invited to go, and address these particular spaces, and that would mean addressing the entire global fraternity, there's a level of excitement that you have gotten that acceptance and endorsement. Yet again, the general feel is that our leaders are really literally selling us to the West to continue being, demeaned and not even helped in a manner that we would expect. What is the significance of all this endorsement that you speak of highly? And how do you convince the people of Kenya that this is not another president who's going to be a puppet of the West?
Yeah, Linda, it's interesting that the best way to understand something, to change it, is to conform by it. When Jesus was born, he was born to a Judaism family. He even performed the Judaism rituals. Then from there, he transformed them from Judaism to Christianity. You can never change what you don't understand. Fortunately, I was an economist with the West, understood the West, and understood what they do against Africa. And that's why when I lived there, I wrote a book called Solomonic Economics. Solomonic Economics simply tells you that we have the West economic model, we have the East economic model, but I take Solomonic economic model, meaning it is a complete direction different from what the East is doing, like you hear the right, China, Singapore, and the rest. And this side we have the West, which Europe, the US, Canada, and the rest. Mm-hmm. Why am I trying to say so? With the current economic models, they could not be able to solve the global financial crisis and look for someone from Kenya to help sort it out. And currently, the global financial architecture, which was designed, imagine Linda, before any African country was actually independent, was developed by the West. It was developed in their own interest and favor. Yeah. Now, Fred Ogola comes and tells them, we have to break away from the West. Let me give one example. There's a G20 meeting taking place in South Africa. I was called upon to write a piece for Africa. And I said, Africa needs to have debt cancellation of the African debts. What was my position? 75 cents out of a shilling is being spent on paying debt. It is taken away from social investment. What are social investment? Education, healthcare, food security, and social protection. So I've written that World Bank, IMF, and those people should cancel this debt to allow Africans to invest money in these areas. And the justification is, where do the West get this money to give us? Imagine World Bank, IMF, is lending you money and they produce nothing. Africa, for example, Kenya, the surface area of Kenya is 575,000 kilometer square. What is the kilometer square of World Bank's land? Nothing. How can we have this land and we lend money? And that's why I'm giving a talk, Linda. I'm not giving a talk about the West. My talk is how Africa can move from third world to first world by the time Africa is 100 years. And
but Prof, I want to cut you short.
Yes.
And perhaps picking it up from your argument where you speak of, a possibility of the Bretton Woods institutions, cancelling some of the debt that they have for Africa. Just how realistic is that? Because Kenyans are looking forward to solutions that are realistic and are possible. I remember the current premier or the current chief cabinet secretary speaking of a scenario where he says you cannot afford to be in bad books with the Bretton Woods institutions. I mean, is it not a scenario where we are taking ourselves there? And just how are the possibilities of us reviving the economy in such a state?
Yeah, Linda, as an economist, I wrote an economically sound proposal because there are three ways to do this. They can cancel, because if you ask yourself, if IMF and World Bank cancels the Kenyan debt, what happens to them? Really nothing. Because what is happening is, where do they get this money they lend? It's the Africans who take money, keep abroad, then they use that money to lend to us, then we pay back with interest. And If that argument is true, they'll cancel it. They so-called debt swap for development. Because they continue giving you money and you're repaying back, why don't they swap this for you to put money in education, healthcare, food security, and the rest? So these are economically sound arguments. The other one is debt relief, which even as I speak, it has been structured by the institution from my proposal. Kenya can benefit from it. That's why I was in Juba. That's why I was in Kigali. Kenya can benefit now. They are realistic proposals. But my economic model is not just about debt cancellation. Economic model called Evolve, E is economic turnaround. To turn around all sectors of the economy which were working and not working before. For example, coffee, tea, sugar, textile, all that should be turned around. V, value addition. We are exporting 80% of our materials we are exporting is 82% of what we export is raw materials. Can we do value addition? Can we make Kenya produce wheels the economy moving so that we can add money? Or optimize talent of the youth in arts, music, sports, technology. Instead of having a youth carrying banners for Mandamano, they should be carrying mouse in their hands, clicking this, clicking that, so that they can have breakthrough technologies in agriculture, in healthcare, and the rest. L is leverage strategic partnership. There are partners who want to work with Kenya, but we are too incompetent and too corrupt to work with. If we have a state whereby for anything you want, you must bribe. When you run a lean and clean government under my administration, lean and clean government, we can attract investment. The other one is now V, vulnerability management. The people who are vulnerable, vulnerable women, vulnerable youth, vulnerable sectors of the economy, vulnerable regions of Kenya to be addressed. And the last one, environmental stewardship. How can the environment, the blue economy, the so-called, if you go to Lake Victoria is a sewage. Because if you go to Sori, you drive 85 kilometers into the lake is when you can fish. Go ask them. I've done all this research. So what I'm talking about is realistic, is attainable, and it can be done. But I'm telling the West, we will not walk their path. Let me explain why you cannot walk their path. To grow the economy, the first form of economy is called hunting and gathering. The second one is called agrarian, agriculture. The third one is called industrialization. Right. The fourth one is called deindustrialization, when the service sector is bigger in the economy, and the last one is reindustrialization. So what I'm trying to say is that the West is telling us, industrialize fast, but we cannot because UK was industrialized 2,000 years ago. How can we catch up if we follow their path? So we are looking at what is Solomonic. Just like Solomon did not side with any of the two women, Solomon found what if you put together, you have a solution where the two women are happy. So I'm not here to please the West. I'm not here to please the East. I am here to please Kenya. We will follow what is the Kenya interest. I can tell you that my policy is that Kenya will be built by all Kenyans using Kenyan resources all the time.
I'd be curious.
We have enough.
Okay, I'd be curious to understand what would be your foreign policy then, and what it is that you talk about, that we all understand that we cannot exist in isolation. So how do we make sure that we do not dance to the tune of the West, and at the same time make sure that we strike a balance in ensuring that, you know, we still maintain that investor confidence or even make it better? If you can tell us something before Linda, 1 minute.
When I say Kenya, my foreign policy is very clear. Social policy, foreign policy addresses two issues: peace with neighbors, prosperity for Kenya, and competitiveness. To do that is very simple. You just ensure Kenya comes first in any of those negotiations. For example, why should the West come here to do the work that we can do ourselves? Why should the Chinese domineer our economy? We should copy what the Chinese are doing. In fact, one of the economic models say, copy shamelessly. What has worked in Europe was copied by the Chinese without a shame. Even Chinese copied everything from the West, then they bring for us here as a solution. Why do we want to go through a long road what has worked elsewhere? Like now the healthcare system, that we are creating a system which is new. Welfare state knows how healthcare works. This mambo ya kusema sha, shi, sho, shu, it has never worked anywhere, but we have systems which have worked elsewhere. Why don't you just implement what has worked? So what I'm trying to say is short. It is clear that should not be able to be isolated. Kenya needs to become a sovereign republic of Kenya, respected in communities of all nations. That's why I'm representing Kenya when I go to New York. I'm going to speak like a Kenyan. I'm going to speak like an African. But remember, Africa also cannot solve its problem without Kenya. Remember, Kenya is an anchor state.
Right.
Kenya being an anchor state, it has to solve the problem of Somalia, the problems of South Sudan. It has to solve the problems of its neighbors because it's an anchor state. And for this matter, Kenya must be respected and must be taken as an adult, because we have actually hit more than 80 years since actually we got independent. Why are we still looking like toddlers?
Right. Prof, time is completely out of our side, but briefly, you sit under a tribunal that is headed by JB as a commissioner.
Yes.
That is under the anchor of the United Opposition. Would we treat you as one and the same with the United Opposition, or you want to take it yourself?
I am a member of the opposition. There's a process on which we are going to have a coalition of agreement within United Opposition. There's already a secretariat. There's a lawyer working on documents. They are looking at the strengths of Fred Ogola. They're looking at the strengths of other worthy opponents. And that's why I am also trying to bring my identity. Who is Fred Ogola? What can he do? What has he done before? Can you trust him? Should I be the trusted person? Then that's what Kenyans are waiting for, because at the moment, that's why I came with Evolve. Tell me what's the economic ideology within the United Opposition. They're still figuring out who should be the candidate. But for me, I'm telling Kenyans, let us evolve healthcare. Let us evolve the economy. Let us evolve our education sector. Like now, if you talk about these things called CBE, where my son is just being asked to cook this one, play with clay. Does he want my son to be a cook? We need to have education that focuses on job creation.
Anyway,
No, competency-based curriculum should not begin by education. Should begin by looking at the job market. What are they going to be competent about? So I have clear ideologies. So should Kenya choose who has been there before, or should they choose who has new ideas which are viable? So the choice is for Kenyans. And I can tell you, I'm only offering myself with humility, isn't it? And I'm asking Kenyans, look at this young man saying he has an idea, isn't it? And not just an idea. It's been written down in books. I have been an academic director. I've been in the universities. I've taught. My students are listening to me probably. They know what I could do when situations call upon someone to do something. So whom can you trust? I can trust you because as a professor of strategy, execution, what is lacking? We lack culture of execution. We talk about manufacturing, industrialization, yet we have flickering electricity. Industrial era is full of generators. I know what needs to be done to fix the economy. And if you trust me, Linda, and the people listening to us, then Kenya has a solution right here.
All right, all the best. You have answered my question also on just how expensive an affair it is to run for president. But when you say you owe it under a coalition, I think it lightens the burden. And therefore, we can only wish you nothing but the best. We'll invite you some more as we get to seek to find a solution to the many problems that bedevil us as a country. I think our business is to make sure that all these voices are heard by the people, and then the people will decide on the ballot. Asante sana, Professor Fred Ogola, Presidential Hospital. We hope to have you some other time. Asante sana.